All right, folks, welcome to today's episode extras. Thanks so much for sticking around and joining us. I am thrilled and excited to have with us one of our guests from today's episode, Tanya Franklin, who is just a fascinating educator and someone who I think brings some really unique perspective to these meaty discussions in our field of education. So Tanya, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Tanya, one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show is I think you have a really interesting journey as an educator, as someone who was a teacher and then left and went to law school. And I think there's, for folks in education, there's kind of the idea of like people who teach and then they go to medical school, or they teach and go to law school, and that story always ends with them leaving. But you went to law school and then you came back to work in education and have continued to do so for a number of years. And so I think that's a really interesting and maybe not always typical trajectory. So tell us about that journey. Tell us about why you made the choices you made, and how you've come to be the restorative justice champion educator that you are today.
Yeah, thanks. So I think it started from my own experience in public education. So I was raised by a single mom in LA Unified. In sixth grade is when I first went to the district. My first 5 years of school were private school, actually, and I felt that really set me up to read well, so that when I got to public school, I was tested and tracked, and I could feel that I was put on a certain trajectory towards college because of the classes and the peer group that I was in. But when I graduated, my high school had about 3,000 students, so we were pretty large, pretty comprehensive, but I knew a lot of my friends didn't have the same setup that I did. They weren't quite as lucky for a variety of reasons, and I didn't think that was their fault or their families, and there was something about the system, the conditions, that made it easier for me and harder for others. So I was lucky enough to go to a really great school where I saw a sign for Teach for America that really spoke to this idea of creating educational equity for everyone, with everyone, that every child deserved the opportunity to go to a great college like I got to. And I thought, that's right, that feels like the thing I need to do and how I need to spend my career. And I was lucky to teach at a school that fed into the high school that I went to. So I started a cheerleading squad, and I would go to my high school homecoming games and cheer right next to my cheerleaders that I was coaching. It was quite lovely. But I only taught for 5 years, partially because I had this calling to make as big of an impact as I could, but partially because I got pink slipped. I got laid off in 2010 along with 8,000 other educators in LA Unified, and so the district was telling me it's time to go somewhere else. And I was lucky again that I had prepared to go to law school, and UCLA's public interest program and critical race studies program accepted me, and it was a good fit for who I wanted to learn alongside and from. So I always knew I was going to stay in the social justice movement. I came to the partnership between my first and second year of law school with a fellowship called Education Pioneers. And when I joined that fellowship, I said, I only want to work in LA Unified, like not for another organization, not for a CMO, just LA Unified, where I was a kid, where I was a teacher. And they said, well, let me tell you about the partnership. You get to work with LA Unified schools, but have some flexibilities and do both serving schools in sort of an educator capacity, but also some systems change, policy type work, making change alongside the district. So I said, let me try this out, and here I am, like 8 years later, still at the partnership. But I think I chose this path at the partnership and the connection from law school because it really is about educational justice. And I'm lucky to have a variety of experiences that let me both work in schools and do policy change. And who knows exactly where it will go next, but I think that practice and policy position is really important for making change on a larger scale.
Yeah. So let's go a little bit deeper into the work you do at the partnership. You are, I think, known by many people as a real champion for restorative justice work in schools. And I'm wondering if you can tell us why this work really resonates with you so much. And maybe also like what don't people understand about that work? Is kind of a buzzword now, but why does it resonate with you? What do you do and what do you work on that maybe people don't actually know or understand?
Yeah, it's a great question. When people ask, what do I do? A big part of my work is professional development and coaching alongside teachers and teacher teams that believe school culture is pivotal for transformation and for academic opportunities for kids. And so that means first starting with ourselves. So do we have a sense of self-awareness and identity, and can we manage when our emotions might impact the way that we lead in the classroom or on a school campus? And I think that's really important for a restorative school, for the idea of restorative justice, for social justice work, period, that you start with yourself, which means myself included. And it's an ever-evolving journey of examining the choices we make and the leadership opportunities we take in service of kids, hanging on to our core values and really exploring how that shows up in our everyday interactions. And so I do a lot of big professional development in Circle, where we pass talking pieces and folks get to respond to questions that I get to come up with around what is hard in teaching, what's great in teaching, how we respond when students are showing us their needs through their behaviors, and how do we get better as educators, because I think Marcus was talking about this on his one-on-one, but teachers are asked to not only teach curriculum and pedagogy, but the whole child. And that means they come to us with mental health needs and traumatic experiences and lack of access to a variety of resources from their families and their communities. And we're lucky to be able to help them meet as many needs as possible in schools. And so we talk about conflict and harm sometimes as an opportunity to learn. And as much as we believe literacy and math and science are our jobs to teach, I think with restorative justice, and maybe other people don't know this, and what I've been able to do alongside educators is, and this is also what really calls to me, is that school is a place of learning. And we are not the criminal justice system or the juvenile justice system. We are a place of trial and error and mistakes and learning, and behavior is literally kids trying something out. I had a teacher tell me once that the job of the adolescent is to push boundaries, and they do a good job of that, right?
That they do.
And it's our good fortune to help them understand safe boundaries and to help guide them through questioning, just like we would in academics, to come to their own understandings about what's healthy and safe for them and their peers in a setting that's going to propel them for college. And so I think that's why it connects to me is I had a lot of those skills from my mom and my teachers, and I'm lucky that I get to work with educators who are embracing that as a part of their role every day in teaching and learning, and that we really do see justice in schools as a way of practicing and growing like who we are and how we just navigate the world.
Yeah. So, restorative justice work, and I know in your world it's referred to as restorative communities, but I think for many of our viewers have probably heard the term restorative justice is the term that's really become very popular in a lot of spaces. Many districts around the country have become, restorative justice districts. And there are, local criminal justice, courts and entities that are like really working on becoming more restorative. And I think there's lots of reason for optimism with the movement towards thinking about behavior and harm in different ways than perhaps we have in the past. I also think we've made a lot of mistakes in some of those mandates, particularly in education, where people have said we did RJ, we tried it, it didn't work, the kids are out of control, right? It's just another fad that we need to move on from. So I'm wondering if you can share some insights about what do you think we get wrong or have gotten wrong with some of our attempts to become restorative communities?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think in a lot of school districts, LA Unified notwithstanding, the initiative came as a desire to lower suspensions and to keep kids in school learning more, which is great. Comes from a place of love and opportunity for kids, and it comes with a mandate of we're no longer suspending. If that's not what's on paper, that's at least what's communicated to folks. And it feels, from a lot of educators' perspectives, like you've told me not to do this, and yet I haven't practiced the skills to do anything otherwise. And so traditional discipline is very much about separation and isolation, which is on the path to expulsion and the school to prison pipeline that we're trying to get away from. But we can't start with the end result. We have to start with the training and the real opportunity for educators to understand not only like what are the skills that I need to show when my student does something and shows me their behavior, how do I respond, de-escalate, and help them stay in the classroom. But do I also know, like in my heart of hearts, that that's the right thing and that I'm the one prepared to do that? And I think we have to build educators' capacity, but also their confidence in being able to have really hard conversations. And maybe kids do need a little bit of a break. And it's not a suspension, but it's a moment to breathe and practice mindfulness even, and then come back to the learning in a way that's healthy for them, but also for their classmates. And so I think a lot of districts come with this great intention of we're no longer suspending, we're going to have circles instead, but need more time for educators to just sit and practice and get feedback on what does that look like, sound like, and feel like. And that's something we've tried to do with the partnership. And different schools have a different amount of time that they can really spend on building the educators' capacity. But it's not just classroom teachers, it's the classified staff members, it's the counselors, it's everybody on the campus.
Yeah.
It's parents, it's everyone having this vision that when harm happens, we ask, what happened, how are you feeling, what do you think needs to happen to make things as right as possible, and what are you willing to do about it now? And building that series of questions and that flow is not always intuitive without a lot of practice and feedback and even adult mistakes and trying it on again, right? And I think the other thing that I think school districts miss the opportunity with is the connection to social emotional learning and direct instruction. So let's actually practice during a dedicated time or integrate it into curriculum, identifying emotions, identifying our own needs, and giving kids the opportunity to practice conflict transformation with each other as real learning, just like we do literacy and math.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you brought up the role of families in making a shift to a more restorative way of engaging around behavior and conflict in school in particular. And that certainly resonates with me as, as a principal kind of attempting to make an evolution in my own school around, becoming a restorative community. One of the toughest parts of the work, I thought, was many students and families, which is not to say the other things you said about educators making the shift were not tough. But even in the cases where like the educators were bought in, kids and families are saying, this kid did something crazy to me, like they're not getting any consequence. The school is not doing its, job of like levying a consequence against this kid or this, group of kids. And therefore you're sending the signal that the school has no rules and boundaries and is unsafe. And there has not been like justice done on behalf of my child, which then undermines the sort of mindset and way of being shift that we were trying to make. What thoughts, I guess, and insights would you offer around the kind of larger cultural shift that includes, to the point of the term restorative communities, includes really the whole school community, and not just the individuals involved in a particular transgression?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because there is a lot of confusing messages that kids get from a variety of adults who love them in their lives. And this is one of many of those examples where a kid will say, well, my mom said this and the teacher says this and I don't know what to do and I'm 7 and I'm in school trying to learn and I have these mixed messages. And so we have to recognize that, right? And understand where the families are coming from and what their messages to kids are, and that whatever we do as educators is not to put down families or to say that the way you've learned things in other places that keep you safe in other places are just not what we do at school to get you ready for college. And the best situations invite families into those conversations and say, how do we really want kids to deal with conflict in the future? When they are in their profession and when they are the leaders of our neighborhood, what's the healthiest, happiest, strongest way for them to deal with conflict? And let's build that together. We know what's happening right now and what they might experience going to or from school or what they might experience on weekends, but what's our vision for the future together, and can we rally behind that? And more often than not, families and educators have a very similar vision of the kinds of leaders we want our kids to be and the kinds of skills they need to practice to be able to get there. Not to say it's easy for anybody, right? For teachers or for families.
Yeah.
And I think the best situations are when kids then at home say, things don't feel good, like we need to sit down and have a circle. We need to speak and listen from the heart, right? But the other thing I was thinking about is, at the core, a restorative community means decisions are made with those who are most impacted. Not decisions made to them, like a punitive structure, not decisions made for them, sort of paternalistic and permissive, saying that they don't have the skills to do this on their own, but with them, right? Which is why, in the best scenarios, we have families and educators talking together about what's the best way to do this together.
Yeah. So, Tanya, I think we have time for one more question, and it's a big one. If you were queen of the education world for a day, what is one thing you'd change, and why?
Can I be the queen of everything? I'm just kidding.
No, just education.
It is just education, but it goes
here.
Limited monarchy. It goes beyond education, right? I mean, my first reaction is eradicate racism. Like all of the things that racism has caused in our institutions and our individual interactions, in what we believe about ourselves and others, and our limitations around empathizing across lines of difference. Like, if we just had no racism in schools and in communities, we would live in such a different set of conditions for our kids and our families that education would be easy and great.
All right. Easy. And Tanya swings for the fences, folks. We're eliminating racism and everything's easy and great. I love it. Tanya, you get my vote for education queen. So thank you so much, Tanya, for sticking around and talking with us a bit more about your your career and your work. I think it's really, really interesting stuff. So appreciate you being here today. And folks, please, if you're checking out this segment on YouTube, make sure you give us that thumbs up. Please make sure you subscribe to our channel. Same thing if you're watching this on Facebook, follow us. Make sure you share this page with your friends. If you like what you're hearing here, we want to connect with as many people as possible. So help us spread the word and join the conversation. And as always, you can find all of our content on our website, which is aotashow.com. Thanks for joining us.